Welcome to this week's episode of the CPG View, the number one CPG information source for global omnichannel leaders. Chris, thank you so much for joining this week's episode of the CPG View. I think known each other through other people for probably several years now, and I'm very thankful that you were able to spend some time here with us. Before we get started, would you mind introducing yourself and the company you're with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chris Hainback. I work with Perrigo Healthcare, and I look after the North America sales side.
Awesome. I think also too, and we've had a prior member who you used to work with, AJ Sharma, is a friend of both of ours, and I'm glad that he could also help us facilitate some of this. But with that being said, to your point, you are responsible for driving global growth strategy across Perrigo's skin healing division and leading the sales org. What key consumer trends or unmet needs are shaping that strategy today as you think about it?
Yeah, even though obviously oceans divide and different cultures, what I'll tell you is consistently true right now is the need for value. And I don't think that's necessarily it's always been a need, but never maybe so acutely as it is right now. What you're finding is with the economic global situation, consumers are in really different spots today. I would say this one's really impacting everybody at every level. And there was an old line I used to hear prior life, cheap is expensive. Said another way, no matter what you buy, it's got to work, right? And so, yes, it may be a lower price point, but if it doesn't deliver what you need and you only have very limited amount of money, cheap's actually more expensive. And so we have really spent a lot of time understanding what's going on in the markets, the different needs, and then providing unique values for our consumers through, oftentimes it's the product, sometimes the way it's communicated, other times it's even the packaging and the multi-benefits that we can offer. And so really, I would say if it's the US, if it's global, it's the same, it's value, but defining that value and what looks like value to different cohorts is obviously different.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, to your perspective, I just read a report today, and this maybe has some, in relation to your categories or maybe not, but this was a report by BCG on the beauty space. And, 2/3 of the beauty brands are imported into the US. So this was, US exposure related. I think you think about this, and to your point, there has not been a time that I can remember, probably since shortly after COVID or in that COVID kind of blur that we were all in, and maybe since like the kind of '08 real estate market, what we saw. I mean, the need for very prescriptive value is real. I mean, and it doesn't, and it's hitting. I've seen this across, no matter the product that you sell, whether it's positioned as a, good, better, best, or mid price point, higher price point. I think to your point, there's always a cheaper solution, but in many cases, cheap is expensive. So defining that value, regardless of the category, is key.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And like you said, '08, '09, it reminds me a little bit of that. Obviously, different circumstances, but was pretty wide-scaled issues. Just in the last 15 years, we have three pretty big changes in the economy that have really impacted. And so consumers are looking for the right products. And personalization, I would say, the other piece of that, right? So is it designed for me? And with the age of e-commerce and the ability to really target people and understand their needs, if you flip it, instead of targeting, you listen, and we can use search and other ways to hear what those shoppers really need. We can better design our products and move much faster than we did prior.
Yeah, amen. Well, I wanted to get your thoughts here. Balancing innovation with heritage can be tricky in categories. Skin healing, I'd imagine, could be one of those categories. How do you think about modernizing a trusted portfolio while staying true to what consumers love?
Yeah, so it's exactly what we're working on right now, honestly. There is so much potential for growth with areas that we're learning, as I mentioned the needs previously, that it's in some ways easy to get distracted with new places to go. And we're certainly looking at that and probably going to go in some areas. However, understanding why consumers love you is absolutely critical. And I'm blessed. I have two brands, Compeed and Mederma, Compeed mostly in Europe, and Mederma here in the US. And consumers absolutely love the product. The repeat rates, the word of mouth is through the roof. And so I have to be very careful. I've been in the role for about a year, not screwing that up. And so we do a lot of listening to consumers. And we tested a couple of different ideas that were working in the market that we thought we might want to run into. And the scores came back, and the consumer said, you don't have a right to play there, or you shouldn't play there. And so we didn't. And that's the most important. I can't tell you how many things we've launched in my lifetime of being in CPG
Sure.
that the data said one thing, but when we got to the consumer, we didn't listen well enough. And so, again, with the ability to really get more cohort focused and understand what they want, it's actually new as old in many ways. I can take a product that is built for foot blisters, which is what Compeed primarily does, and I can talk to different people in different ways, right? Like the first time someone tends to need the product is when they're about 5 or 6 and their parents make that decision. That decision is very different than when you're in your 60s or 70s, for example, and or when you're in your 30s and you're running a marathon, right? And so we've really got to understand what the consumer wants and make sure we're delivering that in the product. And as we extend to new areas, ensure that the consumer is giving us the right to play there, and that oftentimes the overlapping need and the unmet need is something that our brand can really uniquely deliver.
Yeah, it goes back to the, what we all learned is in school as kids. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And I think the brands that can actually listen to the consumers and truly, truly listen, not just hear them, but listen to them, are those brands that typically do very well. Without getting to any specifics, you and I both have had, 20-year experiences across multiple CPGs, and I can tell you, similar to you, there's been times where we've innovation has been worked on, and the data showed that that there was a right to win, that the category was ripe for disruption, that all the signals that you typically would look for, the boxes were checked, and you get in and you launch it, and you have this huge pipeline, and then you're looking at replen rates, and you're thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Why is this not working? And you've been and again, I know, you and I have lived in this world of, you then quickly become into this mode of it's fight or flight. You're trying to then triage a situation. You've got this pipe of made up numbers, $10 million a pipe that's landed and at X or Y retailer. Then you've got $30 million on the water, and you're trying to figure out what are we going to do? And then, hopefully in some cases it works out, and you make some pricing adjustments or promo adjustments, but in many cases you can avoid so much of that pain by doing exactly what you just said, and not falling trap to, hey, I've got this great brand with great heritage, and we can expand into this category. The data tells us that. And if you just make that decision based on numbers alone, or a spreadsheet, you find yourself in the situation that I'm sure not just me, but I'm sure most of us have been in at some point in our career. So I love your point on listening to the consumer. And I think the other thing I would just say is, I don't know if you've heard this term of, VUCA, but a military term, and the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity is only going to continue as our space gets more complex. The complexity driven by the globalness of what we all do and products, and then new emerging channels where, I mean, I can send you some data. I'm sure you've seen it as well, where in some countries or regions, people are selling 24/7 on social networks that 10 years ago, you and I, these didn't even exist. And now these are and I'm not even talking about the TikToks of the world. I'm talking about others that are just shooting up from seeming like out of nowhere. So I love your perspective to that prior point.
Yeah. I've worked in a lot of turnaround business situations where the business is tough, which is becoming more prevalent. And it's very easy to make the excuse we have to go fast. And so you make trade-offs, and then you find out that a year later it didn't work. And if you had taken an extra week maybe, and especially with today's technologies where you can really get feedback very quickly, just taking an extra week and that few extra days to listen to what she wants, really is worth the time.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that my father would always say, but I'm sure this is a common saying, but it's hard to do, but measure twice, cut once. So and it saves a lot when you're in roles like you're in, or roles that I've been in, where you're part of a large organization, large team. But hey, wanted to switch gears here, and in a world that's flooded with skincare claims and health claims, health conscious consumers, how does Perrigo approach trust, transparency, and efficacy in brand building as you think about the portfolio?
Yeah, so to your point, and I've worked in beauty previously, there's a slippery slope of making claims around what you feel versus what is real. And there's a place for both. We happen to play more in the real in terms of the data and the efficaciousness. And we hope that as part of that, if we can solve your issue, you actually feel better as well. And so I'm not throwing shade against the other side at all, but what we're blessed with is a product that really works well. As I mentioned previously, in both our situations, both brands, we have great products that consumers love, and the repeat rates are through the roof. And so we let our consumers shout as much as possible. We have a lot of work to do in social with that. We had a great story. Derma is a scar brand, and there was a situation, unfortunately, where a young boy was bit by a dog. And unbeknownst to us, his mother sent us pre and post and pictures afterwards, and it was astounding. And I was new to the business, but I was so proud of the ability to cause such a meaningful impact to that consumer. And because our products work, that she told all of her friends as well. And it used to be, when I grew up, there were 5 channels or whatever, and you have to sit through the ads, and that's not the case today. I usually pay, frankly, not to have ads where I can.
Amen. Amen.
It's hard. It's harder to reach, right? And so word of mouth is even more critical. And so I do believe, going back to this long-term view, if you have great products that deliver on unmet needs, you're going to win. You got to have the money to take the time to get there, but it's going to win. And so we stay really focused on delivering what we say we're going to deliver, and have the efficaciousness that we commit to, and our brand and our consumers expect. And that is delivered. And this is public news. My 2 brands are up 20-30% the last year. And it's mostly about getting trial in people's hands and letting them try the product, and then having them tell others. And so we're making a concerted effort to really drive trial, because in many cases, we're the number 2 branded player in cold sore, but our awareness in almost every market around the world is under 5%. Wow. So it tells you the people that buy it love it. But there's a lot more people we need to have buy it and try it. And so it's kind of a fun, easy job when when you got a great repeat and a great product. It's about driving trial as hard as you can.
That's interesting. A few years ago, maybe it's been almost 2 years now, I joined a company. The name of the company's Pattern, and similar to the example you just gave. When I joined, I had never heard of the company, and the company's doing great things now, and they're doing all these things to drive awareness, and so this is not a knock on that, but it's more so just like I would guess the awareness in the space of like the kind of circles that you and I have grown up in is like very small. So but the amazing part is when you see people that do trial the product, or become partners of the product, they absolutely love it, and they tell all their friends, and it's a really neat spot to be in. Similar to you, like yours is a different type of product, mine is a different type of solution, but to your point, it's a fun feeling when you know that impact is had, and that genuine feeling is there when they actually do the motion or go and experience it. And it's unlike most things that I've felt in my career. Now, I've been a part of some great brands, don't get me wrong, like Sharpie was a tremendous brand, still love Sharpie to this day. Crock-Pot, Elmer's glue, like some of these brands. But that one feeling that you have, to your point, where like awareness is low, like I think Sharpie at the time that I was there maybe had like 90% North American market share, and a very large percent globally as well, but everyone had kind of used a Sharpie, so it wasn't this like new sense of epiphany. But yeah, no, I totally can relate to your point.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, all those brands, pretty much everyone's heard of, right? Where Moderna, you probably haven't heard of it unless you've had a scar.
Mhm.
And everyone gets scars, but oftentimes you don't even treat it or you don't realize, like Moderna works for old scars. So you may have had surgery 4 years ago. And the only people that pretty much know that are me and my team, right?
Yeah.
So we've got work to do to drive that awareness. So
Well, that's great. That's awesome. Hey, wanted to ask you, you've led go-to-market strategies and teams at global scale. Like in addition to your current role with Perrigo Skin Healing Division that you're leading, you're also leading the global sales team. So you have a pretty large remit. But, what have you found to be the most critical success factor or two when launching skin healing products in today's competitive landscape?
gosh, that's a good question. So the consumer's loss, as other people have famously said beyond myself, that is job one, right? So you get the product right. But oftentimes I have seen companies stop at that. So we have an amazing product that the consumer loves. And unless you go on D2C, you get this other really important value contributor in the midst of that, which is a retailer.
Mhm.
And so often we don't design for the retailer. And by the time we take it to the retailer, because they see it as like a necessity versus a benefit, we don't utilize the talents and the capabilities that that partner has. And so the number one thing that I've found success is get a great consumer proposition. Job one. Nothing works long term if you don't do that. But then job number two is understand the needs of your customer. Just like you do with the consumer, you listen to the consumer, you got to listen to the customer. Too often in my career, we bring something 6 months, a year beforehand and say, hey, here's what we're launching. Mr. and Mrs. Retail, you ready to go? And they're like, well, I don't make money on that. I already have 10 things that basically do that. It doesn't fit my shelf, like all these obvious things, but we don't listen to them early enough and we don't bake them in. And so on the right items, right big enough things, you got to co-create. You got to work together well in advance so it becomes a joint effort because they have so much knowledge of the shopper. And we oftentimes confuse the word shopper and consumer and kind of bucket them the same thing. They're very different. I used to sell dog food, right? As a consumer of dog food is very different than, but what they're thinking when they're in that store can be night and day versus what they're learning or what they're doing at home. And so you've got to take the time to do both. And it's pretty rare to find organizations that are excellent listening to the consumer, the shopper, and the customer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And going back to that made up example of, $10 million conceptual pipeline that's like going to launch in a store and 30 million on the water. Let's just say the worst feeling that someone like you or I could have in a commercial leadership role, or even actually in any role within a CPG is, to your point, you things start to go off course, and the merchant, whoever he or she is like, I could have told you that was going to happen. I could have told
Right.
you that was going to happen. I could have told, I've seen this movie. I actually, all I do is watch these movies day in and day out, and I could have told you exactly what was going to happen. So I think to your point, I don't know if you've ever heard of the lottery ticket effect. Have you
Yeah.
ever heard of this? So I'll get this directionally right. But a study was done. The whole notion is people that are critical are oftentimes skeptical because they don't feel heard. And in
Mm.
this value equation that we're talking about is, this retailer, whoever they are, is many times they don't feel heard. And your point of the need to co-create, but this lottery ticket study was done, and essentially it was the test was they had, call it 10 people that bought lottery tickets. Well, they had half of those people were pre-assigned a lottery ticket number, so they didn't have any ability to choose the number. The
Yeah.
other half, they did choose, they wrote their own number or picked their own number. Well, the crazy thing is they came back and said, hey, we want to buy your lottery tickets back. Well, the people that didn't have any input just gave them, there was no value. There was nothing to them that was
Uh,
important. The folks that wrote their lottery ticket down, the statistic, I'll send it to you after this, was something like 10 to 20x greater of value. So if they bought
uh,
it for $1, they said, hey, I'll sell it to you back. I will, but it's going to be $10 because this is my number and I feel
yeah.
invested. So it goes back to your point of the need to co-create.
Yeah, ownership, joint ownership. Yeah, that's right. Now I'd not heard that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to make sure we keep you on time here. You're super and I want to be respectful. So, what are you most excited about right now in your role, which we have two, whether it's, breakthrough innovation, bold new brand strategy, or something entirely different?
Going back to your VUCA comment, the world is that way right now. And everybody I talk to is looking for ideas to accelerate growth and to better meet needs. And I can't, even in 08, 09, I didn't see it to this extent. Everybody I meet with globally, customers and consumers are looking for new. Now, what that looks like can be different, right? So low income consumers are looking for better, value at the low end. On the flip side, there are consumers saying, I have less time today because I have more people that are quitting or whatever. Like there's so many things going on. And so what everyone's looking for something different. Change breeds opportunity. And those that can listen and move fast with that knowledge and insight are going to win. And so I am pumped and scared at the same time because there's so much coming. And I am trying to make sure that myself and my teams are ready to seize these opportunities and take these insights that we've gained and action it into better solutions for everyone in the value chain. And so I'm excited to get going on that. That's what I'm working on today.
Yeah. I love that. And that old saying of never miss an opportunity of a good crisis, similar to you. Like, I don't know if you know this, but the meaning of crisis in several other languages is actually two joining of two terms. It's danger and opportunity.
Huh, I did
And
not know that.
and it actually is a little bit of what you just said of you're really really excited, but you're also somewhat terrified, and that combination is where is very very powerful. And well, I'm sure obviously you're a very smart bold leader who's really thinking ahead of the curve. And from what I've heard about you as well, you're a very people driven leader. Your people respect you a great deal. Obviously, AJ had nothing but great things to say about you. So I'm sure anyone who's on your team is lucky to be in that role. So hey, I wanted to again close out by saying thank you so much for taking some time. I know we're both busy, and I think we've tried to get this on the calendar for a while. And then just appreciate the time. And then I wanted to ask you, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with in closing?
You hit it at the end, and thank you for the kind comments, but can't do it alone. There are many times that when things are really tough, my first instinct bluntly is to go harder and faster. And it's so much wiser to wait and bring your team with you. It's also a lot more fun to win together, right? And so something I struggle with every day. I am so blessed with great people around me and in my life that someone gave me this tip like day 2 of the job was get great people, empower them, train them, and let them be great. And that is stuck throughout my life. And so when things are tough, like today, make sure you have great people around you, listen to them, trust them, and let them guide you as well. And so that's what I would say. Thank you, Don.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Chris.
Great to meet you. Great to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the CPG View, the #1 CPG information source for global omni-channel leaders.